Hi there, it's Craig here. Today we're going to talk about airlocks. And I know doesn't sound like a very exciting topic, but there are a few things you might need to know in the future. You might want to have these things on your belt in case you do have a problem. You'll know what to do. I have two different kinds of airlocks here. One of them is with the floating thing in it, and the other one is basically like a drain, where there's water in the bottom that stops the gases from escaping. That's how a drain works. This is kind of the opposite, but it's the same idea. It allows gases to come out of the fermenter, but it stops the gases or any air from getting into the fermenter. And that's the whole point of an airlock, is that you want your CO2 to escape while your fermentation is taking place, but you don't want any air getting into the fermenter. So these things provide like a one-way valve, and that's what they do. Okay. Now, ideally, you want a sealed container for your beer or your wine or whatever you're making, and then an airlock so that regardless of what happens, nothing can get in. There's no way anything's going to get in there and contaminate your beer or your brew, let's say. Now, while your brew is fermenting, it would be very difficult for anything to get into it, even if you left this off and just left a hole there. It would be hard for anything to get into it because while it's fermenting, CO2 is being pushed out all the time. It's being pushed out and it's going to escape through whatever hole or whatever means it can. And if you plug this up, this thing's going to the lid's going to fly off and the whole thing's going to explode one day. So you have to have a way for the CO2 to escape, and while it's escaping, there's absolutely no way any air can get in, even if you've got a hole here. Okay? That's an open fermentation method. But once that settles down and fermentation slows down or stops, then you no longer have that outward flow. You no longer have that, and so things can now start creeping into it because there's no longer that airflow out of it. That's where an airlock comes into play. Now, of course, you don't want to mess around with this. You just want to put your beer in, put your yeast in, put your lid on, and put your airlock on, and then leave it. And don't mess around with doing it without and with whatever. Just put your airlock on, and you're good to go for 7 or 8, 10 days, however long you're going to brew this thing for. Okay? Now, sometimes you have a problem. And you may notice after you've put everything together that your airlock is not functioning, or it's not bubbling or doing whatever it's supposed to do. And you're wondering, like, what's wrong? What's happening? How come this isn't... You're thinking it's not fermenting. You think something's wrong with your brew. When in actual fact, it's more likely that something's wrong with either your airlock or with your fermenter itself, where air is being allowed to escape through some other path other than your airlock. So your airlock's not being as active as you think it should. Okay, so I've had questions. People, they put their beer together, wine, whatever it is, put their airlocks on, everything's good, and a couple days later they come home or come in and they look at it and it's like, why isn't this thing, like, it's not bubbling, or it's bubbling very slowly. Nothing's happening. What's wrong? Something's wrong. They think something's wrong with their brew. So you need to have other methods to check. Now, so if that's the case, then you probably have a leak somewhere in your fermenter, an air leak, where the air is getting out some other way. And that's not a problem, really. You don't have to do anything at that point. You don't have to panic. But I'm going to show you a way to test your fermenter to see if it does have a good seal. And if it does, then you don't have to worry about any of this stuff. Let's put this one on. When I put my airlocks on, I take everything out, because once you put this little cap on here, once you put this thing on, when you press down, when you're putting it on, you're going to create a suction. And it's going to suck this little cap down against, like a vacuum, down against this tube. And then when you put your water in, you're going to have problems. And I've had this happen before. Just put it on while there's nothing there so that the air can equalize itself. Nice and tight. Okay. Now put your thing. I know this is easy and simple, but a lot of beginners here. and then you get yourself some water. You can boil your water, let it cool if you want, a little safer. If it does get into your beer, it's not going to contaminate it. Or you can use vodka. If you use vodka, then it doesn't matter if it ever gets into your brew, because it'll probably help it. So make sure your lid has, like, there's little holes in this lid. Make sure that they're not blocked. Just tiny, tiny little holes. Make sure they're clear so that the CO2 can get out. You put it on and away you go. Now, how to test to see if your airlock is, or if your fermenter is completely sealed. And I'll show you with both of these airlocks so you can see what happens. Okay, so what you want to do, once you get everything sealed in here, you can actually experiment with this before you make your beer if you want to know. You don't even have to put anything in here. This is empty, okay? Put your lid on, put everything together, and then what you do is you lightly press, come on, there you go. Lightly press on your lid and just hold it. You're going to get a few of those little bubbles there. Just hold it, and if the airlock stays, see how it makes a difference, right? Okay? If it stays like that, then you got a good seal. There's no air leaking out of your fermenter. And then when you let go, of course, it goes right back to the way it was before you did that. So you know now that everything is sealed. Okay? Now I'm going to show you this with the other airlock because it's easier to see with that one. These ones you don't want to fill too much, but I'll just put a little extra in so we can see. There we go. That's about where you want to fill that one. So you can see where it is when I'm not touching it. Okay, one side's a little higher than the other, but that's whatever. Okay. Now when I press on the lid, you can see the difference, and I'm continuing to press at the same pressure, and it's staying at the same level. That means that I have a good seal. There's no air leaking out of this fermenter at all. And when I let go, it goes back to the way it was before I pressed on it. So we know we've got a good seal here, and you don't have to worry about anything. Just put your batch in here, wait a week, and bottle the thing. But let's create a situation where we do have a leak. Just a small leak, not a big one. So now I've created a situation where I have a leak in my fermenter. I've lifted the lid a little bit here, and I don't have a perfect seal anymore. So if you test your fermenter and this happens, press down, and as I'm pressing, it's going level. So it's level now. It shouldn't be level because I'm still pressing on the lid. And then when I let go, it goes backwards. It goes the opposite way and then returns to normal. If that happens, you have a leak in your fermenter. So you don't have your airlock telling you what's going on. It's not bubbling away. It's being kind of sluggish and, stupid, and it's not giving you the information you expect it to give you. How do you know your fermentation is working? How do you know when it's done? Well, to find out if it's working or not, take the airlock off and just look through the hole. And you should be able to see a lot of foaming action and bubbles and things going on the surface of your beer or your wine. And if it is, your fermentation is working. Just put the airlock back on and let it be. Just leave it alone. Leak, no leak, whatever you got, just let it go. Okay, and I had a situation once where the airlock didn't do anything. And I thought, something's wrong. And I took it off and everything was going in there like a bat out of hell. So I put it back on, I just left it. All right, I let it ferment. The other thing you can do is just lift up your lid, take a look inside. Inside the rim, around where the surface of the beer is sitting, you should start to see, after 2 or 3 days, like a caking, a guck stuck to the side there. That's a sure sign that fermentation is happening. And again, you don't have to worry, just leave it alone. Now, if you have a good seal and everything's working great, you're done. You just bottle it in 7 or 8 days. But if you don't have a good seal and you know that, then you're going to have to keep an eye on the specific gravity after about day 5. Depending on the temperature, if it's a warm climate, like 80 degrees, around day 5 I would start checking my specific gravity to see if it's ready to bottle. Because if you have a leak, you don't want it sitting with that leak in there too long. You want to get it sealed in the bottles. If it's a cooler climate like 21 degrees Celsius or 72 Fahrenheit, whatever, then you're going to take probably 6 or 7 days to ferment. So about day 6, maybe 7, 6 I'd say, do a hydrometer test. Now you can do that by lifting the lid and doing a test right in the brew. Sanitize your hydrometer, of course. Get in and take the reading and get out and seal it back up as quickly as you can. The better way to do it, though, is to use the spigot. This bucket doesn't have one because it's my wine bucket, but use the spigot, the tap at the bottom, to take a sample into your hydrometer. I don't have my hydrometer here, but you got your tube with your hydrometer in it. Fill the tube, follow my instructions on hydrometers, and take a reading. If it's 1.010 or less, bottle it. And again, we're talking if you've got a leak here, and if you don't have a perfect seal. Okay, if you've got a good seal, don't worry about it. Bottle it when you're ready to. One thing about taking a hydrometer test from the spigot is when you take beer out of the spigot, make sure you remove the fermenter, the airlock from the fermenter. Because if you don't, you've got water sitting in here, okay, it's been sitting there for like 5-6 days, right? As soon as you start pulling beer out of the bottom of this thing, this water is going to get sucked down into your beer. And I don't trust that this water isn't contaminated since it's been sitting there for so long, all right? So you don't want that. So what I do is I just take this thing and I just lift it off and I sit it on top like that, tipped like that, so there's a little space in there for the air to get in. I mean, you could just take it right off and put a piece of paper or something over top. It's not a big deal. Okay, but make sure that air can get into here before you extract beer out of the spigot. Otherwise, it's gonna be a bad situation. All right. Now, take your reading. If you've got a good seal, doesn't matter. Bottle it when you got time. Don't wait, weeks or anything like that. But if you don't have a good seal, then if you find that your beer is ready to bottle that morning, you better call in sick. I would get it bottled as quickly as possible. All right. Because you don't want it sitting there with no positive pressure inside the container to keep the germs out. Now, one thing about taking the lid off, and I've been accused of being a bit anal about taking off the lid in the middle of fermentation, and I admit that. There is a carbon dioxide layer sitting on top of the beer as it's fermenting, and even after it ferments. The carbon dioxide is heavier than oxygen and helium and other hydrogen things that are in the air. It's heavier than everything else, so it tends to sit there like a blanket. It's called CO2 protection, and it does protect your beer from anything. Even if you do lift the lid and look at it, that CO2 is sitting there like a cloud on top of your beer, protecting it. So you're okay. So opening it a few times and taking a look inside while it's fermenting is not a bad thing. But I always maintain that the less intervention you do, the less chance there is of anything going wrong. So use your judgments. If you have to look inside, if you need to get in there for some reason, go ahead and do it. Just make sure you use your common sense and don't contaminate it. Don't cough into it or something. All right? And turn all the fans off in the room when you open the lid as well, because the breezes will disturb that CO2 layer and you'll be open to problems. All right? One last thing. I didn't bring it. It's downstairs. I forgot to bring it. If you do have what's called an airlock blowoff or blowout, when the beer is fermenting so wonderfully and so vigorously that it touches the top of your, like underneath your lid here, and it actually starts to spew out through the airlock. And if that happens, it just means that your beer is healthy, man. The thing's fermenting in there like a son of a gun and you got no worries. But you should clean that out. Do you see this little, like I'll put this back so you can see. And let's assume that this is a blown out airlock. It's filled with beer. It's all clogged up top here. Your fermenter is up to here. I mean, it's just, the lid is bowing out like that. You want to take this off and you want to clean it. Before you pull it off, make sure you clean out all the beer from around inside this little crevice here. Because when you pull this off and there's beer in there, that beer that's been sitting out in the open air for God knows how long is going to fall into your brew and probably isn't not the best thing for it. Okay, So I take a paper towel and I just go around in there, I soak it all up with the paper towel, clean it all off, get it so there's nothing's going to fall into it, and then I take it off and I put like a piece of paper towel or something, a paper over here, just to keep the hole from anything getting into it, like a fruit fly or something. Wash your airlock, sanitize it, and then put it back on. You might have to do that a few times. If your thing is fermenting that heavily, it's going to be doing that for about 3 or 4 days. So don't do this, and then don't brew beer and then go on vacation for a week, because this thing could be sitting here stewing away, clogged up, and you don't know about it. You want to be around to attend to that. Alternately, you could have 2 of these, and if one gets bunged up, then you just clean the other one up nice, sanitize it, clean around the thing, take this one off, put that one on, boom, and then you can clean this one later. Thirdly, the blow-off tube, which I've showed you. You got a bottle half full of water, okay? I showed you this before, but I'll show you again. You got a tube with the bung on the end. You just put the bung, you sanitize the bung, okay, because it might touch your beer. There. You put your tube into your bottle, and you sink it down about an inch below the surface. You don't want to push it all the way down, because then it's harder for the carbon dioxide to get out, and you'll gas up your beer. So just put it about an inch below. And then what I do is I got a clamp here, but you can get a clothes peg or something like that, as long as it doesn't pinch the tube. And then you just put it down there, and it's a perfectly good airlock. You can use this all the time. There's nothing wrong with this. It does the same job. It's the same thing. It works just as well, and it's good to have around if you break one of these, because these do crack once in a while. If you do break your airlock, you got this as a backup. And then so if it's going to blow off, it's going to come through the tube, and it's going to end up in the bottle, and it won't hurt your beer, and you won't have to clean it all the time. Okay? If you got kids running around, if you want to make sure this doesn't get tipped over, and make sure that nobody messes around with that. That's the only thing about it. But if you've got this somewhere where nobody's going to get to it, then it's in fact, I prefer it because I can hear the bloop, 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 the bubbles. I can hear it from the other side of the room. I know everything's going just great. Okay, so that's Airlocks 101. You never thought there was that much information about an airlock, but there is some things that can go wrong, and those are some solutions. Thanks a lot for watching. Can't think of anything else I want to say, and other than cheers. And my beer's gone kind of flat, but still pretty good. Take care. Thanks a lot.